I'm going to kick it over to Rachel from Dream Defenders. And Rachel, if you could share a little bit, from your perspective as a director of Dream Defenders working with young adults, this need for long-term strategy and power, why that feels really important to move beyond just protest and activism.
Yeah, of course. And thanks so much for organizing this call and for so many people being on it. That's really exciting because many of the kind of things that Hashim elevated Dream Defenders has really been trying to grapple with. So we're excited to be in deeper kind of learning space with folks around these questions. So Dream Defenders was founded in 2012 after the killing of Trayvon Martin. And basically students came together from across the state to plan a big march to demand justice around his murder. And then a year later, when George Zimmerman was acquitted, we took over the Florida Capitol and occupied it for 31 days and 30 nights. And we're demanding basically a special session around Stand Your Ground and the passing of Trayvon's Law, which was this like suite of legislation we had put together around the criminalization of Black youth. And, this was like before Black Lives Matter in, 2014, when we were seeing like young Black people out in the streets all the time. And when Trayvon Martin was killed, it was kind of one of the first moments, at least in my generation, where I remember seeing young Black and brown youth like protesting in mass numbers. And when Dream Defenders took over the Capitol, we like very quickly went from being an organization that nobody knew about to being pretty like kind of being surged into the national spotlight in many ways. We had celebrities joining us in the Capitol. We were, Phil, our director at the time, was getting like flown out to, speak on TV. And in many ways, we felt like, whoa, we are on the brink of winning something really, really big. And because we were like so popular, but, at the end of the 31 days, it was like very clear that like we weren't going to win anything, despite the like being really popular and being in the public view in a way that was like changing the narrative, because we actually like didn't have the power to change anything. And like when we were in the Capitol, we saw the people who like really had the power. Like it has had trifecta Republican control. So the governor's seat, the Senate, and the House have been controlled by like the far right Republicans for 20 years. We saw like the private prison lobby, like literally saw them walking around the Capitol every day, saw Marion Hammer, who's like, the person behind, she's an NRA lobbyist who's like behind the Stand Your Ground law. We saw her in the Capitol every day. And it was very clear that like those were the people who actually had the power. And despite us being popular, we couldn't get confused that meant that we had power to actually win things. And then a year later, when Mike Brown was killed, we sort of had a similar experience where like, we saw people turn this really tragic moment into like a fighting moment. And like, people in Ferguson were in the streets every day for 3 months. And at the end, Darren Wilson like still got off. And so it was like another moment in terms of just like, okay, like we're mobilizing mass amounts of people. In many ways, I think the public is with us, but we aren't actually we don't have the political power to translate that into real wins and into moving a real agenda, as Hashim said. So, in that kind of moment, we decided to take a step back as an organization and go through like kind of a deep process of really thinking through strategy together and what it meant to actually figure out a long-term plan. And during that time, we also formed with like 7 other organizations in Florida to really figure out like what is a long-term path towards getting to governance, towards having people like all of us on the call actually in power and being able to move an agenda. And through that experience, we've been kind of like, kind of experimenting on different things. Like we endorsed someone for governor. We're going to endorse in the presidential election, really thinking about what is the role of elections. Thinking about how do we get to scale? How do we recruit mass, a lot more people, especially in this moment when there's like so many young people who are radicalized around big ideas like socialism and eliminating student debt and prison abolition. How do we create an organizational structure that's actually able to bring those people into it and grow into the thousands? And so really excited about the lab and excited about the ability to really think about these questions with other folks grappling with them, because yeah, I think there's a lot at stake, as was said earlier, and like, you know, really need to step up in many ways as a sector and really meet the moment. And so excited to be in experimentation and discussion with other folks around how we do that.